welcome to today's Industry Essentials webinar, Cracking the Code, Unraveling the Challenge of Coverage for Novel Cannabinoids. I'm your host, Brian Gilbert, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all for this insightful session. Today, we're diving into the world of insurance for novel cannabinoids, a subject that has been a hot topic in the rapidly evolving cannabis industry. Serving as an encore to our multi-part series hosted by NCIA's Scientific Advisory, Hemp Committee, and Cannabis Manufacturing Committee, today NCIA's Risk Management and Insurance Committee has brought together a panel of leading risk management, insurance, and compliance experts to shed light on the challenges this unique area presents. Over the next hour, we'll explore why insurance for novel cannabinoids can be such a challenging code to crack, and our esteemed panelists will help you navigate through liability and legislative loopholes, offering a clearer understanding of your exposure while considering the patchwork of federal and state requirements. In case you missed it, this session is hosted in conjunction with the recent release of the third edition of the RMIC Risk Management and Insurance Manual, specifically exploring this subject, which you can download off of NCIA's website at any time following today's program. Our goal today is to unravel the complexities of insuring novel cannabinoids and equip you with the knowledge needed to make informed decisions regarding your insurance coverage. So whether you're a cannabis business owner, a risk manager, an insurance professional, or anyone with an interest in this topic, this webinar aims to provide you with practical takeaways to safeguard your products, operations, and workforce. As always, I actively encourage everyone to participate in today's conversation. Ask those questions in the chat room, post them to the Q&A board, and please engage with our experts during that live Q&A session that'll be following today's presentation. Remember, your active involvement will enrich the experience for everyone involved today. So sit back and settle in as we delve into this fascinating world of insuring novel cannabinoids. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Simone Casson, who will be kicking it off and taking us on this enlightening journey today. All the panelists can activate their video feeds from here, and I'll turn it right over to Simone to kick things off officially.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm Simone Casson. I am the CEO of Cannabis Capital, which is an insurance firm. And we specialize in cannabis, craft beverage, professional athletes, a bunch of other stuff. But we focus on cannabis, and I am a committee member for the risk management. So I'm really, really excited and humbled to be here. Thank you so much for having me and letting me be a host. All right. Well, with no further ado, I am going to have my panel of guests go ahead and introduce themselves. And we'll start off with Meryl. Meryl Gilbert, would you please let everyone know who you are?
Thank you, Simone. I'm Meryl Gilbert. I am the co-founder and CEO of Trace Trust. We have been in the industry since 2015, and we are leading advocates for safe and reliable cannabis experiences. And do you want me to hand it off?
Awesome. Would you please hand it off to the next person, please?
Yes, I'm going to hand it off to Adam.
Thanks. My name's Adam Pat. I am the president of ICANN Insure, one of the nation's leading providers of insurance to the cannabis and hemp industries. I've got 20 years of experience in risk management and insurance with a focus on hard to place risks, including the cannabis space for the last 6 years. We provide best-in-class practices and service to the recreational and medical industries through AM Best A-rated carriers.
Awesome. Adam, can you hand it off to the next person for me?
Yes, Summer.
Hi, thanks, Adam. My name is Summer Jenkins. I am currently the executive director of Cannabis Insurance Wholesalers inside Oklahoma. I have a pretty extensive career in the cannabis industry. I started out by creating products, insurance products for the cannabis industry. I have created 3 products. I also consult on claims and currently serve as the director of the cannabis division of a national wholesaler. So we write all coverage lines, including bonds, workers' comp, and product liability for the types of businesses that we'll be discussing today.
I'm Dr. Brenda Wells, and I am a professor of risk management and insurance at East Carolina University. I wrote the first paper on insurance and cannabis in the academic literature and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. I've consulted on claims, risk management procedures, you name it. I write for Marijuana Venture Magazine, and I'm a very proud member of the National Cannabis Industry Association. And it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome, Dr. Barbara. And then I think our last but not least is Adam Pat. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, please?
I introduced Adam.
Oh, you did? Okay, we already introduced him.
I did. So you tell
Okay.
us what we're here to talk about.
Okay, well, wonderful. Let's move right along. So today is going to be a very, very interesting conversation. We've had a lot going on between the differences. Before, when we first started many moons ago, it was all cannabis, and now we've kind of gotten it separated into different categories. And one of the categories that we're having a very interesting time right now is our novel cannabinoids. And so if you're in the CBD business, right, of any kind, you definitely want to hear about this, because insurance for your product, your business model, or whatever it is that you're doing is very, very interesting, and it is evolving every day. So we are going to go into what are cannabinoids and help you crack the code on how you can get coverage for your business. Sounds good to everybody? All right, so our first person is going to come in and tell us what cannabinoids are as a whole is Meryl. Go ahead and take it away, Meryl.
Thank you so much. So let's just start with this word novel. And it is something, obviously, it's a type of book you could read. However, in this case, it is something new and not seen before. And I bring this up because I also want to bring attention to this picture to the right of this very illegal packaging, because this is also part of what the problem is. And so this is looking like a classic cereal. Called Lucky Charms, but two things really stand out. It has 600 milligrams of God knows what, and it also says that it's showing the actual California state symbol for legal cannabis, and obviously that is completely not a legal seal. It has not been approved by the regulatory bodies of California, and it's got a lot of misinformation. So I bring the attention to that because this conversation about novel cannabinoids really came about when we started really expanding legal access in states. And for the states that didn't expand anything, people kind of snuck in under what was allowable under hemp and CBD and created these very lab synthetic variables of the actual cannabinoids that belong in the plant. And so the biggest ones that we see are, and the DEA in February came out and really put, a squash on this and is really holding people accountable, is Delta 8, THCO, which is an acetate. None of this occurs naturally in the plant. There is a tiny, tiny bit of Delta 8, but what we're seeing here and what we're talking about today is not that. These can only be obtained synthetically. Do not fall under the definition of hemp, right? So again, we are, allowed this small percentage of CBD falling under a certain level below 3%. And that's not these. So the most important things to note is they are found mostly in unregulated states. They have high intoxication levels, which is also the very big risk factor. If you don't know what these products are made, and it causes harm through incorrect dosing and product contamination. Remember, there's no oversight to this. And so if we could go to the next slide, I'm just going to give you a little bit more of a definition of this, and then Dr. Brenda is going to really help us out explaining more what happens when you ingest some of these things. So anyways, Delta 8 is a small amount found in the plant, as I said, but this synthetic version is really to try to replicate more of the hallucinogenic head high that you would normally find in a regulated THC product. Delta 9, which I said is the naturally occurring cannabinoid in the plant, but is being synthetically manipulated in labs to create these other Delta 8 THC products. Delta 10 THC, another synthetic isomer from the Delta 9 THC. It's milder than delta 8, but it's still, again, something that is being manipulated. It is not a natural occurring ingredient. And THCO is an acetate, produces toxic ketene gas found in vapes. So again, you are getting these very unregulated synthetic products into a variety of different types of ways to administer it. And then THCP occurs naturally in hemp and cannabis plants. It's low concentrate, but it's being, again, chemically manipulated, and it's identified as one of the strongest psychoactive cannabinoids. So none of this works well for a risk-free environment. None of this does well for a consumer experience, for safe experiences, and none of it moves us further into really developing a really stable, legalized environment that has, testing, validation, and correct labeling out into the marketplace, which we need to build trust for. So Simone, I'll pass it back to you so you can introduce Dr. Brenda and what she's.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meryl. So now that everybody knows what a novel cannabinoid is, when we talk about insurance, we are talking about two things: indemnifying, making yourself back whole, but also keeping you safe, right? And risk management. And so one of the things that you talked about, it being synthetic and a host of other things, I think it's important that we know how cannabinoids and CBD, novel cannabinoids, affect the body. So we're going to bring in Dr. Brenda. Dr. Brenda, I would love to hear your thoughts and hear what your breakdown is on how it impacts the body, and those things that we should be looking for as far as effects.
Okay, thank you, Simone. It's a pleasure to be here. One thing that I don't even think a lot of doctors fully understand is that there is a human cannabinoid system in the body. It's the endocannabinoid system. Your body manufactures cannabinoids. The cannabis plant has over 120 different cannabinoids in it, and your body has receptors that were made to respond. This is a fairly new medical discovery. I believe it was discovered in 1988. So now the medical community, there's even an entire journal called the Journal of the Endocannabinoid System for doctors to publish in and share research. It's a very fascinating system. It affects pretty much all your organs and all your functions, as you can see on this slide. Could I get the next slide, please, Brian? Okay. It affects your lungs, your liver, your colon. And, if you have heard people talk about the health benefits of traditional cannabis, this is what they're talking about, that there are, and the research on it, I should say, is very limited because it's still federally illegal in this country. So you don't have every clinic and doctor's office doing testing and validation of these effects. But those who believe strongly in cannabis as a medical substance believe that this is a very valid system that responds well to your cannabinoids. Next slide, please. So there are some positive potential side effects of cannabis and novel cannabinoids, but let's focus on the novel cannabinoids. First of all, they are considered to produce a milder, gentler high than traditional cannabis. They are thought to relieve pain, just like cannabis does, reduce muscle spasms, improve your sleep quality, calming when you have an overactive nervous system or immune system, in reducing inflammation, reducing sensory overload, and not that I needed help with this, but improving my appetite. It can do that as well. Next slide, please. Now, here's the downside of your novel cannabinoids. They can cause tremors. Just like some people, when they smoke cannabis or consume cannabis, they get paranoid. Well, it can cause anxiety, dizziness, confusion, It can make you pass out. It can cause vomiting, hallucinations. And as Meryl said, this is not regulated. So there's nobody testing these to make sure that they're pure when they go to market. And certainly there can be lung damage from vaping. You will recall a few years ago that we had a vaping sort of scandal in this country where several people died from vaping. But what happened was, it wasn't the vaping, it was what they were vaping that contained some nasty chemicals in it that were not meant to be in those cartridges. And so people died from it. And that is the real risk here. I don't know how many of you in the audience have children, but you know, if I have a child, and I would much rather him consume regulated, tested, safe cannabis than these novel cannabinoids, because as the next slide will show, they are unregulated. The FDA is not looking at them. The USDA is not looking at them. And so these, even if you're buying them in a reputable business, in a store, and like I'm in North Carolina, where cannabis is still very illegal, and you know, all we have access to are these novel cannabinoids. That's all you can get in this state, and so people are using them. But they're about as safe as buying cannabis off the street from a stranger, because you do not know what is in those cartridges. You do not know what is in that flour, and nobody's regulating that. And so that is the real problem I have with these. Is the safety is iffy at best, and you know, the stakes are pretty high. No pun intended. Especially if you are, you know, in vaping or inhaling it. So I believe that's all of my part. I'm going to turn it back over to Simone.
Well, Doc, that was very, very informative. I think a lot of our audience, whether or not you are in the position to be looking to obtain insurance for your CBD business, whether you are looking to use CBD, or if you are an insurance agent and you're looking to cover it, I think understanding what those risks are going to be very, very important. Not only as you move forward to put in an application, whether you're the agent, the business owner, or just a consumer. This was a lot of great information, right? So, Brian, you want to move to the next slide? All right, so I guess this is my part. So I'm an insurance agent, and I get a chance to put in applications for one of the biggest, and we'll talk about a couple other ones, but when you're going into CBD, you're usually looking at either general liability, product liability, or excess liability. And we're going to talk about the product, right? How do you cover this product? And as an agent and the owner of an insurance agency, it is more than a notion to get coverage for a novel cannabinoid. It's really, honestly, easier for me to do for a full THC running business than it is for a CBD. And that's really based on the very gray area that we're in. In many states, well, we already know it's not federally legal, right? But in many states, the requirements are different. Not only are the requirements different, in many states also, when you're dealing with hemp, there are different regulatory bodies that deal with marijuana versus the hemp area. So this can be a very, very gray area in putting in an application. And if the person that you're working with does not know how to put in the application, the correct methods and everything else, you can be totally denied or have an extremely high premium. So we're going to talk about what this looks like, right? So the first thing is, why does it vary from state to state? Well, that's a very easy answer. I think everybody knows. It's because it's not federally legal. And so we have two governing bodies that really kind of orchestrate when we look at our risk and a host of other things. And those two are not saying the same thing. The first group, as we've already talked about, was the FDA. They have not decided that it is a dietary supplement or that it is a food or beverage. So because of that, the FDA has said, yep, pretty much it is what it is. We don't know what it is, right? So there's no level for the states to look up and say, okay, this is how we need to be able to look at this. So it's going to vary from every state, their interpretation and what their regulatory board decides. The second entity that we're looking at is, as we've already talked about, the DEA. The DEA has said that this is a synthetic substance and it is legal in some areas, and some of them have walked away from it in some states or whatever. So because of those two bodies, we have a very big gray area. So let's break down what this means. This means that, as we've already talked about, when we talk about testing, it can be so many that there's not required in some places. And so what are we looking for? As Doc has already talked about, some of the issues that happened were based not on the cannabinoid, but on the foreign products that were found in the product, right? So what does that look like? What should they be testing for? So we're looking for testing centers. Of course, they have to be testing for pesticides. They got to be testing for bacteria. They got to be testing for mold. They have to have any of the heavy metals or any residuals that are going on out there, right? And those things are what are going to keep, whether or not you have a pathway to make sure that there's a third-party test for that, is going to determine your premium and whether or not you're going to be covered. So although it may not be a requirement by your state or by whoever your regulatory, it is going to be required for you to have coverage. Cool? Any questions about that? Now, usually when we talk about testing, the first thing that we think about is labels, right? So you get something tested, you use something, you ingest something, and then there's usually a warning sign. We've all seen the commercials for any kind of drug. You know, the handsome couple is walking on the beach, they're holding hands, and life is good. And then it tells you it can cause heart attack, loss of blindness, and all this other stuff. Well, we have labels for cannabinoids also. It's very, very important. But these labels are very, very restricted because you can't make any claims. So the cannabinoids can say things as such as different, that there's going to be a difference between smoking it and ingesting it, you know, definitely being able to let you know certain different claims that will keep you aware of what's going on. But again, the big thing is the testing and being able, as Meryl said earlier, being able to have clear and valid labeling. That's a nightmare. So you got to make sure that you're able to do that. And then why, again, we've already just discussed it, is why it's so important that we decide that we eventually get uniform. Well, it's going to be important that we eventually get uniform because as it stands right now, we're holding our manufacturers and the retailers to different standards for their testing and their liability. So in that, making sure that the tracking is going all the way from seed to sale, making sure that the product liability is led on the correct entity, and then just moving forward and doing all of your due diligence, not only as a consumer, an entrepreneur, but also as an enterprise. And that's all I got for you. Now, next place. So now that you know all of this, you know that you got to have your warning sign, your warnings, your labels. We understand that the DEA and the FDA has told you, not too much, and that you're going to have to be able to rely on the requirements of your state and also your agent. Why don't we move it over to Summer to tell you some of the tips and tricks of the trade that will get your product covered in cannabinoids?
Thanks, Simone. I'm happy to be here. So one of the things I can tell you guys about cannabis and cannabis insurance is it's important to understand that the supply chain from the insurance application all the way through to the policy issuance first. So my role is I am the customer. My customer is Simone, another agent or broker. So she puts the application together, she sends it to me. Me and my team look at it, underwrite it, and send her back a quote. The working with somebody that understands the differences and nuances in the product is very important. Oftentimes you can go to any broker and get a quote. Because novel cannabinoids are still considered to be in a very gray area, some standard companies have been providing quotes, unknowingly providing quotes and issuing policies on some of these things. I've seen people coming off of policies with well-known companies like the Hartford, or a policy that they wrote with their regular farmer's agent that also handles their car and auto. And then they're surprised when they later get canceled. Getting your policy canceled is not the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing that can happen to you is to have a valid claim and have that carrier not defend you and tell you that you have no coverage. And in 2017, Insurance Services Office came out with some new forms. The forms were to be adopted by standard carriers and any other carrier that follows their recommendations for policy issuance or policy language. Those coverage forms specifically excluded cannabis by their definition, which also includes some hemp products. And then there was a hemp allowance or a hemp give back. So some insurance carriers use that hemp allowance and hemp give back only on property type policies, which would be if you are a building owner and you lease a building to a cannabis or hemp business, they'll allow that. But if you yourself are a cannabis or hemp business, they have excluded coverage for you. So it's really important to, I would say, buy a policy that's specifically for your industry, where you know that you have coverage and you know that the insurance company is intended to cover your exposure. There are traditionally two types of methods to cover product liability. The first would be a general liability policy. That general liability policy covers bodily injury and property damage to other people that arise out of your business operations or your product. In the cannabis industry, however, the product liability piece has been carved out and is most often excluded on the standard general liability policy. So what that would mean is that you'd have to purchase a separate product liability policy. And these policies are what I refer to as cannabis-specific product liability policies. That part sounds like it'd be a very easy decision. I have a cannabis business, I have a CBD business, I'm just going to get a cannabis-specific policy. Unfortunately, this is not an easy industry. Unfortunately, a lot of it is very complicated, especially for operators in the novel cannabinoid space or in the hemp-derived CBD space. So even if you do have a policy that's specifically for cannabis and CBD, the definitions in the policy are still varied in a lot of different ways. So some carriers may define cannabis as medical marijuana only, which would then exclude states with adult use. Some carriers call cannabis an unadulterated cannabis product, which means it can't be adulterated. In a claim scenario, there could be a case made for certain concentrates, and anything that's not just straight flower being considered as an adulterated product. Definitely your Delta 8s, hemp-derived Delta 9, some of those would also fall outside of that definition. So it's very important to understand how your policy language is written and what it says is included and what it says is excluded. The keys to getting, for underwriters to really view your business as viable and really want to insure you are, one, having a good application. We want to know who is doing the business, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what the end product actually is. We like to look at labels. We want to see what ingredients you're using. We also like to see that there are some type of ISO approved testing lab that's being used. We want to know about your processes to prevent contamination. Also, what type of procedures have been enacted in the event of a product that needs to be recalled. We want to just know that you, as the business owner, are reducing your exposure with having good practices and procedures in place to protect your business and in turn protect the insurance company as well. So the purpose of the policy, like Simone mentioned, is to indemnify you, to make you whole again in the event of a covered loss. But if there is a loss that occurs out of your negligence or failure to employ good business practices, that's definitely less desirable. I feel like the good thing about the industry that we work in, that I work in, is that I'm not relegated or limited to just one specific company or carrier. We have several different carriers. So, if we can't get you approved or written with one carrier, their chances are that we have another company that can still write your business, give you a quote, give you a policy. It's just going to be significantly more expensive for you. So the more information that you can provide on your processes, procedures, that you're selecting good ingredients, that you're not using things that are harmful or that have been banned or outlawed in other regions, just to, I guess, make a product that's more cost effective for you and less beneficial to the consumer, the better your price is going to be. So the keys are, good labeling, good warnings, prevention of contamination, you have solid manufacturing processes, and that you, the owner, are mitigating risk. So the more information that you provide, generally the better. Because we like to see that that the business owner is a good, solid, well invested in their success and the overall success of the business. Unfortunately, the CBD and novel cannabinoid industry is not viewed favorably by a lot of insurance companies and carriers because of the 2018 Farm Bill. It's thought that a lot of CBD companies are kind of skirting and dancing on the fringes of what's legal. The 2018 Farm Bill did allow hemp to get off of the schedule and be viewed off of the Schedule 1, and be viewed more as a commodity. But with that, the Analog Act calls hemp derivatives, it considers them to fall under that same definition. So by virtue of the fact that a lot of the new Delta 9 products and some of the Delta 8 products are being made with hemp-derived cannabis, they are not considered a Schedule 1 substance and are being widely sold in states that have that are illegal for adult use and recreational use cannabis. I'm sorry, medicinal use and recreational use or adult use cannabis. You can go to the next slide.
Summer. So following up on what Summer has discussed here and Simone and everybody, when it comes to what underwriters are looking for on this side of the business, it gets a little bit complex, especially with the cannabinoids. As you've gathered, this is a little bit of the wild, wild west at this point. And a lot of, what I get as a response from a lot of clients is, well, this isn't required by law, or why do I need to have that? Or my state or jurisdiction doesn't require these particular measures. Why is underwriting requiring these things? And the simple answer is because the insurance carriers get to pick and choose what kind of risk they want to be transferred for your premium dollars. So just because something is not required by law doesn't necessarily mean that it's not required by the insurance companies in order to provide coverage for you. So what are the underwriters looking for? Well, the underwriters evaluate risks associated with various factors, including novel cannabinoids, to determine whether to provide coverage and what the premium is going to be. So I've listed here about 9 key factors. This certainly is by no means all of them, but certainly some key points that I think everybody should keep in mind. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on each one of these things. First being regulatory environment. As we've just heard, underwriters are going to assess the legal status of the specific cannabinoids in the jurisdiction where the insured's business operates. So this includes understanding whether the cannabinoid is legal for use, sale, distribution, and the regulatory landscape can significantly impact the risk profile of the business that is dealing with the novel cannabinoids. Scientific research comes into play. Underwriters are going to consider the available research and evidence regarding the safety, the efficacy, the potential health effects, and a lack of substantial research or conflicting findings is going to raise concerns about potential adverse effects and long-term health risks, which therefore will ultimately affect your coverage or ability to obtain such coverage. Quality in manufacturing is certainly a big one, as Summer just mentioned. Underwriters evaluate the quality control measures and manufacturing processes that are in place to ensure consistency, purity, safety of products containing these novel cannabinoids. It's particularly important to minimize the risk of contamination and mislabeling, which then, of course, leads into consumer health and safety. Brenda talked about this as well as Meryl. There's definitely concerns about potential health risks and adverse reactions associated with the use of these substances. So underwriters may inquire about clinical trials, adverse event reporting, consumer feedback to better understand the safety profile of the products in use. I put dosage and administration on this list, although it's a touchy subject because, a lot of legal reasons and labeling is another whole conundrum and a rabbit hole we don't necessarily want to go down. But the way the novel cannabinoid is formulated and administered is important. Underwriters might assess whether the dosages are standardized or clear or appropriate for intended use, or if they're even listed at all, because technically, in many circumstances, that information should not be claimed. So whether product labeling provides adequate instructions for consumers, all of those aspects come into play when, from an underwriting perspective also, as do claims and liability history. So businesses with a history of product liability claims, or really any claims for that matter, legal issues related to these substances or other cannabis or hemp substances would certainly be considered a higher risk. And the underwriters will review past claims and loss runs and any potential legal action or lawsuits to understand what the potential liabilities are and assess the financial impact of the insured, on the insured's business, as well as industry-wide. So they're not just looking at, say, your business, but what has the industry done? What is the industry seeing with regard to these types of claims? There's market demands and trends. So understanding the market demand for products containing novel cannabinoids and overall growth trends in the industry helps the underwriters evaluate the potential profitability and sustainability of the insured's business. The underwriters will look at risk mitigation strategies. They're looking for strategies that the insured's business has implemented, such as quality control processes, product testing, consumer education, warning labels, compliance with regulations, and things of the like. And of course, lastly, the manufacturer's reputation. So the reputation of a manufacturer distributor of these products is considered, and especially businesses with a track record of compliance and quality and ethical practices, those are going to be viewed more favorably by underwriters than, let's say, businesses that don't have those characteristics. So based on their assessment of these factors, the underwriters are going to determine whether to provide coverage, the terms of that coverage, and what the premiums are going to be. So it's important, as you heard when filling out the applications, for businesses dealing with anything in the cannabis or hemp space, especially with novel cannabinoids, to provide accurate and detailed information to the underwriters on the applications so they can facilitate an informed risk evaluation process and ultimately provide you with the right coverage.
That was amazing. So I think the big takeaway at the end of yours, Adam, is definitely, and I know this as an agent, people they oftentimes wonder, well, why is my rate so high? Why is it this or whatever? And it is imperative that they understand. And also getting a quote only lasting for 30 days. And that is because our market trends change, right? Rates often change, circumstances change, the data changes. And so I think it's really imperative for everybody to understand, whether you're applying for insurance or becoming an insurance agent or a broker or a entrepreneur, that these are the factors that are going into actually creating your policy, the terms and conditions, and how much you're going to pay. Because that's what they really want to know about, how much money they're going to pay. Right?
Yeah, if you don't mind, a couple more quick things.
Yeah.
Another
Sure.
reaction from people is, hey, we're only dealing with 2 or 3 products, and why is my premium X dollars, or we only sell $50,000 in product a year? Why is my rate so high? Well, because it doesn't necessarily have to do with just the sales volume or the number of products, but exactly what it is that you are manufacturing, selling, distributing, or et cetera. So I think it's
definitely.
take
And
a
that's
look.
something that we ask, how much are your annual sales, and a lot of people will think, okay, well, that's what I'm covering. I'm covering that risk. No, you're covering the whole kit and caboodle. What are the odds of this totally going left? Right. So there's so many different layers that go to this. So I want to thank all of the panel for doing such an amazing job and doing their thing. So I'm sure Brian, can we open this up for questions now? Because I'm sure we have some questions. And I probably wasn't paying attention. So what you got going on for us? You got some questions for us?
Yeah, we don't have any questions posted to the Q&A board yet, but we definitely can open it up to the audience members to get some initial feedback and engagement. So we've got a lot of audience members still here in the room. So I will sort of put it back on the audience right now. Don't be shy. Post those questions either to the Q&A board or inside of the chat room. Even if you just have a remark that one of the panelists can riff on, that would be super fantastic and help us extend the conversation and take it where you all want it to go. I guess, Simone, as far as this specific section that we still had covered here inside of the slide deck, did we want to dive any more deeply into what your policy looks like?
I got some questions. So I'm going to start off my first question, and I'm going to go in through everyone. My first question is going to be for Meryl. So Meryl, with Trace Trust, you guys kind of create the SOPs and all of the other stuff, the standard operating things. And so I know as an agent, that's a big thing, whether I'm doing product or general liability. But what is one of the, a lot of times they ask, do they have handbooks? But in this product liability kind of resource, what would be your your takeaway or give some advice to someone who was manufacturing a cannabinoid product?
Such a great question. And each of you touched on this when we didn't really get into it, right? So whether you're producing your product yourself or somebody else is producing it for you, you want to make sure that they have good manufacturing practices, GMP, right? That's what that stands for. And what leads into that is looking at everything in that facility from the outside to the product before it goes out into the marketplace. And the goal is the ability to be able to recall that in case of an emergency. But what does it really entail? It entails, what is your onboarding? How do you hire and staff and train people? How is, your standard operating procedures, which are great and many requirements when you're new in the industry, is a prerequisite for your licensing. However, just downloading a form and filling it out off of the internet is not an actual practice. It is something that is a living document, and it helps you train people day in and day out how to execute what their job is. And it also helps because there is transition usually in the workforce. People get promoted, people move on, you change jobs. And so anyone should be able to, at any point in time, walk in, read that document, and be able to perform that task. So that's SOPs become very important. The other piece about GMP that is so crucial in this is that it validates all the ingredients, right? So all the raw materials, packaging, everything, make sure that they are followed up and meeting the standard requirements of the oversight regulatory body. As you get into manufacturing, and particularly when we're talking about the cannabis as an ingredient, or even the hemp derivative ingredients, where is the source of that? Has that been tested prior to it coming in, right? So that you are really being able to protect yourself by being able to source from the beginning to the end where this came from. So all of this, really comes down to just good operational practices. And I guarantee you, if you're following these things and you get to tell the story about it, you get to promote your products as safe, you're able to track and trace them from the beginning of seed to sale to finished goods, and you're able to demonstrate to your insurer that you are really actively trying to make wonderfully safe products consistently, that you have QA, quality assurance in every aspect. And that reassures the risk managers that you are actually sincere in making sure that whatever you put out in front of the public is safe and reliable. And if it's not, that you take responsibility in being able to recall it.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
Meryl.
you so much, Meryl. Summer, did you have something to chime in, or we got a question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, it looks like we have 2 questions.
Okay, we'll
John
do it.
D
I saw that one.
says, curious about the stance from insurance professionals. Will you work on THCO vape risks these days? Or is it an automatic decline? So that's a great question. Generally speaking, THCO acetate is a decline. But the good thing is, especially working with an organization that's not just a true program. Generally speaking, true programs, and I guess both sides have benefits. I've worked on both sides. I still enjoy writing programs, but I also enjoy the flexibility and freedom of working with multiple carriers and having in-house authority so we can kind of decide our own destiny. There are so many novel cannabinoids that are coming on the scene. Scientists, when they discover that a new cannabinoid that may be previously untouched or little known may have psychoactive properties in high concentrations, they will extract it, concentrate it, synthesize it, and turn it into a product. So it's almost impossible for us to fully understand every single cannabis derivative that's on the marketplace. In the marketplace right now. So THCO is one of those. It's newer, it's lesser known, but it is also a hallucinogen. It is also about 30 times stronger than just Delta-9 THC. So if the THCO was in a very small amount, if it wasn't synthesized, if it wasn't concentrated, that might make it more desirable and not just a straight decline. But that's something that an insurance broker agent could really help us understand. So if you can explain to me or to one of my underwriters, why this is a good risk, why this particular THCO product does not maybe have acetyl ester in it, does not maybe cause hallucinogenic side effects, then we might be able to make a case for it. So there is, as of all the policies that I have seen, there is no THCO acetate exclusion unless we write one into the policy specifically. A lot of my policies that I write in our office, we do specialize in CBD. So I do write in a THCO acetate exclusion because I don't like THCO acetate, but I would love for somebody to change my mind.
I think, Summer, that is a key point, and we keep going back to this, but I don't know if we can stress this enough. As she said, we've seen some of the traditional carriers go into this space, and hey, everybody, I hope it works out for you, but you really need to have someone who's going to advocate. And when you're looking at an agency, really find a broker or a carrier that's really understands and is specialty and specific into that space where they can understand what's going on, but also having an agent that understands the business model and the culture and everything else that's in there so that they can advocate for you. Because again, as we said, you got to understand, nobody has to take you as a client. Nobody. They don't have to cover you. They want to, of course, but if the juice isn't worth the squeeze, you have to be able to understand that. So having somebody, an entity that really can advocate for you, being an insurance agent in the cannabis space is more than just coverage. It is definitely advocating your business model, why you're worth the risk, and in the event, making sure that the paper that your policy is printed on is worth something, right?
And then Jonathan had a question too.
Sure. Where is it? Because I can't see it. I don't see Jonathan.
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Research institutions that may not necessarily require procurement of cannabis need a product liability policy. Jonathan, are you just asking specifically about a general research institution that's not, I guess you said procurement of cannabis, so they are not working on cannabis? Do they require a product liability policy? I believe that's the question.
They would probably require GL, right?
Yes.
Right, general liability.
So within that general liability, yep.
For $100.
Yeah, so within that general liability policy would be a product liability, So that'd be one of the policies where the GL has products included and it's not carved out. But a research institution's primary exposure would be professional in nature. So the bulk, the more expensive policy would be errors and omissions.
Yeah, their professional liability. And that's something I know we've talked about many times, but if you are a consultant, if you're giving any kind of fiduciary or, advisory or whatever in this space or any other space, but especially in our cannabis space, whether it is my cannabis nurses, right? All of that, so need to look at those professional liabilities to keep themselves covered in the event that the label doesn't work out, you know what I mean, or whatever you decide. So always that, and that's a person, for the person or the entity. What do we have here? We have, what policies do you prefer? The GL with product built into it or the GL and another product? Michelle asked, what policies do we prefer? Is it general liability with a product liability built into it, or is it general liability with another product policy? My answer is it depends on the circumstance and it depends on the model. There is no snowflake is alike. So that's my answer. It just simply depends on the business model. Everybody else, y'all tell what y'all think. And that was just me.
Let's hear from Adam. Adam's an agent too. I'm curious.
Right, Adam over there smiling. What you think, Mr. Pat?
Actually, I'm still thinking about the THCO question two questions ago, because I want to add something to that real quick before.
Okay, well do that and then answer the other one. But no, answer this one first. Which one do you think? Do you think it's cookie cutter or not?
No, it's never cookie cutter.
Okay, good. That's the answer. Now go ahead to the THC.
Real quick. Just because an insurance company does not want to cover you for something doesn't mean that you can't do it. So it doesn't mean that I'm advocating for something that might potentially be harmful or whatever. Don't take this that way. But you are just self-insuring for those risks. If there's an exclusion on the policy, you want to conduct your business however you want to conduct your business, go for it. But realize what you're self-insuring for. Along those same lines, a lot of people forget that as they're opening a new business or expanding a business that's currently in place, as they continue to add products and expand into new directions, that these things may or may not be covered by your current policy. So just because you had insurance 6 months ago and your application was improved with certain conditions doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing right now fits that same I guess likability factor to the insurance carrier. So make sure to keep your agents informed when you are expanding, when you are adding new projects, to make sure that you have the proper coverage. So that's all I wanted to say.
I totally agree with, I think that's a wonderful point, Adam, is that I think sometimes, and that's us as agents, we have to remember that, but also reminding our clients that these policies are not stuck forever, that you're going to grow as your business grows, as your product listing, your inventory and all this other stuff. And that's another reason why having a great relationship with your agent and your agencies is important, to be able to have an evolving policy.
Yeah, and I think so with some carriers, with us, for example, some carriers, if you have a product that we don't like and we don't want to insure, we're just not going to cover you, period.
Okay.
Because of how claims work. So if we are on the claim first dollar, if I say, the lawsuit alleges I got hurt from taking your gummies that had THCO acetate in it, I also got some flour from you, I also, ate some of your other edibles, and we're going to sue you. You can't just sue someone for one product. The insurance carrier still has to defend you for those injury allegations, period. So if there is THCO acetate that we don't want to insure, but you have other products that we can insure, we're still not going to insure you, because we'll still get drawn into that claim. And on Michelle's question, Michelle, I would say this, I agree with the other panelists. The caveat would be a general liability policy is usually occurrence, and a product liability policy is usually claims made. General liability policies on occurrence basis don't have a retro date. So your insured has a little bit more broad coverage on that form. But if they are coming off of a claims made policy, they need to keep a claims made policy. So that's where I think the two differences come in. And Michelle agrees. with that sentiment too. So I think we're all kind of on the same page. But in short, there really is no one size fits all case. Usually claims made policies are cheaper, more cost effective. And Norm, hey Norm. Norm says, keep in mind there are several carriers offering split trigger policies on occurrence, GL, CM, and products. So I guess a split trigger policy would claims made product. Okay, Norm, I don't know. I don't want to try to interpret what you're saying there. Norm posted something in the chat that has to do with this subject as well. But Norm's on LinkedIn, so if you have questions about that, ask Norm.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you so much to the audience members for the engagement in the Q&A session. It always takes the first one to spark that initial snowball. So thank you so much for engaging with the Q&A. Simone, did you want to leave everybody or lead the panel sort of in our final thought section, just to have everyone leave the audience with that key takeaway from today's program, and we'll start to wrap things up from there?
Sure. Well, my takeaway is, one, I want to thank everybody for coming in and even having me. I think the big thing that we have to understand is that if you're in the cannabinoid arena, whether as a consumer or entrepreneur, making sure that you're looking at the warning signs, you understand the effects that it can have on your body. And in addition to that, making sure that you are covered, whether or not, and doing all of the due diligence and meeting the state requirements so that you can obtain coverage. That's all I got.
Perfect. Well, I'll throw it over to Dr. Wells to close it out from your perspective. And you're on mute, by the way. No worries.
There we go. I got it. Want to thank everybody for being here. We had a lot of fun putting this together, and I think education about our industry is so important for everybody, regardless of what you deal in, what your segment of the business is. So on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you all for being here. And if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them over.
Fantastic. Well, let's shoot it over to Adam with I Can Insure.
I appreciate everybody coming out virtually to to engage in the discussion and participate in this. And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly as well. I'll be happy to help you out with anything that you need.
Fantastic. And let's throw it over to Meryl to talk about her key takeaways and potentially an opportunity to carry on the conversation surrounding this subject in person this fall.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's, such an important topic. We don't touch on it enough. We really, for us all to succeed and really be a recognized worldwide industry, really setting standards around product quality and safety really become what is most important in destigmatizing the industry as a whole and making this, all that it can be as we bring in more professionals. And avoiding risk is a big piece of any industry. So, very grateful for this opportunity. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn with any questions, particularly if you're thinking about, your product safety, or you're thinking about getting GMP, or even what that means. We're here for you. And at Trace Trust, we work very closely on this. So Rihanna Wu, my business partner, and I are very active in NCIA, and happy to answer those questions.
Awesome. And Summer, as always, your thoughts can help tie things together and close it out. So do you want to close it out with the final thought?
Sure. Thank you again, everyone, on behalf of all of the risk management and insurance committee members and NCIA for attending today. All of us are available on LinkedIn. If you have any additional questions, we're always happy to help and love talking about insurance. I personally love finding solutions for difficult risks. So, feel free to reach out to any one of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Summer. And thank you, Simone, Meryl, Adam.
I had a good time.
Dr. Wells, yeah, fantastic for leading today's conversation. It was great to work with you all specifically over the last month and a half to sort of ideate and develop this conversation that was sort of serving as sort of an encore session to our multi-part series that we've been spearheading over this summer and spring surrounding this issue. In case any of you all in the audience missed the 5-part series that really dove deep into the issue of minor, novel, and synthetic cannabinoids, many of the issues that Meryl and some of the other panelists touched on throughout the conversation, we dove very deeply into, specifically the interconnectedness of lab testing and labeling, and how the patchwork of different state requirements, state to state, as well as a lack of consistency federally, has contributed to so many of these issues surrounding this. So would definitely highly encourage you all to dive back into that series. I'll drop a link in the chat room so that you can learn more. And with that, we thank you all so much for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials webinar. We hope this session in particular has left you all with valuable insights into the complexities surrounding insurance for novel cannabinoids, and provided you all with the tools to better help understand your exposure amidst this patchwork of federal and state requirements. Like I mentioned, this has served as the interactive session surrounding the recent release to the updated risk management and insurance manual. So if you haven't downloaded that, please head to NCIA's website following today's program to do so today. Before we sign off, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our esteemed panelists for sharing their expertise and insights. As always, we want to provide these opportunities to learn, grow, and connect with like-minded professionals amongst NCIA's network. So stay tuned for more details surrounding upcoming webinars spearheaded by the RMIC, as well as our other committees in Q3 and Q4, as well as some in-person events that we're going to be hosting across the country this fall, organized by National Cannabis Industry Association. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you all next time. And with that, we'll leave you all with this end of event credit sequence highlighting the 50+ businesses that have signed on to support our next edition of our annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Day event. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.